Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everyone, back to my courses of macroeconomics. We'll carry on our discussion of chapter 1, gross domestic product. We are in part 3. Actually, in the previous videos, we already dealt with many definitions and topics. From 1 to 5 in part 1 and 6 to 10 in part 2. I'll put the links below for the videos I referenced. And now we're going to see how to measure the GDP. So let's get started. First of all, we have to make sure the difference between stock and flow, because when it comes to math application in economics, we need consistency. So economic variables in aggregates can be classified as either flow or stock variable, right? And we can give an example for better understanding. So we can illustrate the difference using a bathtub. Okay, so the water level in the bathtub at a given point in time is a stock variable. However, the amount of water that has flown into the tub over a period of time is a flow variable. So let's see here the picture that illustrates perfectly these two concepts. So here, for example, the water inside this tub represents a stock, right? However, the water that is flowing from the tap, in this case, is a flow. Okay, so either an inflow because it's entry, and outflow because it's exit. Okay, so to remember, a stock points in time, such as account balance, debt, unemployment, and flow over a period of time, such as investment, income. So as you see here, the stock of capital is a stock, right? So the capital is a stock. So we have an amount of capital, right? But this amount of capital, it is increasing, decreasing, it's going up and down due to inflows of new investments and outflows from depreciation and depletions. Okay, now gross domestic product. We define it gross domestic product. It is actually a measure of the income and expenditures of an economy, right? It is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. So I emphasize on all final goods and services produced within a country, which means that this product is at its final stage. It's at the final form of the product, right? So what is included? We include all final products. And what is excluded? We exclude intermediate products. We exclude as well used products, financial transactions, non-reported transactions, and barter trade. For intermediate products, final products are those used or consumed at their final stage of production, right? The opposite of final products is an intermediate product, because it is not used or consumed at its final stage, but it is used within or consumed within the process of the production. So stages before, not last stage. Okay. For example, Michelin tire. A Michelin tire could be bought by a car producer in order to produce his car, right? In this case, if the client buys the car, he's not buying the tire, but buying the car, right? So in this case, the tire is an intermediate product. However, if a client buys Michelin tire to replace a flat tire, okay, in this case, the tire is considered as a final product. Okay, so this is kind of the difference. The reason actually that we exclude intermediate products, because otherwise there will be to avoid actually the double counts. Okay, now used products. For used products, any good produced in another year, even though it is sold in the current one, is not included. Okay, for instance, a used car produced and sold in 2017 but resold today will be included in what? In the 2017, right? Will not be included in the actual GDP, right? In the current GDP. Financial transactions. Okay, another point is that in used car, for example, if there is any commission paid for a dealer, this commission is an income and therefore should be included in the GDP. So this is also another important point. Financial transactions. For financial transactions, actually, they are not included in GDP, because the GDP is an economic concept. In any transactions that not directly represents a production should be excluded. Okay, so examples of financial transactions are when we use the financial instruments, okay, such as the purchase of stocks, bonds, mortgage securities, credit default swaps, etc. Again, the commission that stockbroker earns on the sale of financial instruments should be included in the GDP because they represent an income. No reported transaction. So actually any transaction that is not reported to the government should be excluded from the GDP. Either because it's difficult to measure or we don't have enough data about the sector. So for example, illegal drugs, do-it-yourself, household activities that are not reported, the so-called underground market activities and black markets not included in the GDP. Barter trade. For barter trade, it occurs actually when people exchange product for products, and therefore it's not a production because not used without using the payment of money, the use of money, and therefore it's not an economic transaction. Okay, so let's now move to nominal versus real GDP, and for this actually we need examples. Basically, GDP is an aggregate. When I say an aggregate variable, is a synthetic indicator of a set of elementary variables. Okay, so if an elementary variable, for example, a price of a specific good and service, this is an elementary variable. The corresponding aggregate would be the price index of a set of goods. Okay, basically the GDP can be computed as prices times quantities. We have to define the prices and quantities for every single sector or business. Okay, but we'll deepen this concept of in the calculation or the approaches of calculation of GDP. So for the moment, the difference is that nominal GDP is measured at current prices. However, real GDP is measured at constant prices. Okay. Like 2006, the case of Morocco, actually this reference year is not anymore, is not the one we are using in Morocco, but 2017. Anyway, for the moment, we'll focus on the definition. So, nominal GDP is also called GDP at current prices. Is the variable measured in current monetary units. When I say prices here, the current monetary units, i.e. based on the prices that prevail when measured, right? And that's why we need the prices and quantities of every, single product in that year. However, the real GDP is the value of all finite goods and services based on the prices of a reference year, rather than on the current prices. And therefore, we need to fix the reference year. And when using prices of reference year, the evolution of real GDP reflects only the evolution of the production volumes. So this is why the real GDP is like nominal GDP adjusted for inflation. Okay, so here is the example of an hypothetical economy that's producing only two goods, water and bread. So as you see here, the prices of water are here and the quantities of water are here, and as well for the bread prices and quantities we define for every year from 2014 to 2017, bearing in mind that the base year is 2015. So how to compute the current prices, the GDP at current price or nominal GDP? So it's simply the prices times quantities plus prices times quantities for all goods. So in this case we have two goods and then the prices and times quantities of the two goods. And it is 200, 1 times 100 and 2 times 50, so it's 100 and here is 100, so 200. For 2015, 2 times 150, which is 300, plus 3 times 300, so which is 300, it is 600. It equals 600, sorry. And for 2016, the same, so it's easy, just this times this plus this times this. For the constant prices, however, we are using the prices of the base year. So here the base year is 2015. So for water, we're gonna use 2 for the water, and for the bread we're going to use the 3 euros. Okay, so for example for 2014, 100 times 2 euros, which is 200, plus 50 times 3 euros, which is 150. 150 plus 200 is 350. Okay, 150 plus 200 is 350. The same for the rest. I mean for the 2016, 200 times 2 plus 150 times 3, which is 850. And for the 2070 is the same. Okay, so this is very easy for nominal and real GDP. Now the issues of this real GDP is that how to value new goods that didn't exist in the base year. Okay, this is an issue. Another issue is should we keep the same price if the quality of a good has significantly increased or decreased since the base year? Also, this is an issue. Shouldn't changes in relative prices be reflected? So to overcome these issues, some countries, they thought about using a different method that is called GDP at chained volume. So let's explain this GDP at chained volume. Actually, real GDP is the GDP in volume, right? So the same as here, GDP at chained volume is the GDP using the volume, okay? But the thing is that to overcome the issues that we mentioned just earlier, is that we have to redefine a base year every X years, every number of years. For example, in Morocco, as I said, it was 98, I think, then 2006, then 2017. For European countries, they redefine base year every 5 years, more or less, okay, on average, okay? And to avoid redefining every time this base year, we can compute the GDP at chained volume. So we use the chain series, okay? So which is the same, because the real GDP is the GDP in volume, okay? The same here is the GDP is in the volume, but here we construct a chain. So to overcome the issue, I mean to redefine every time this base year. So the method is that we have to value the GDP in every period using the prices of the previous year. And to do, we have to compute, right, the real production volume. So here, the real production volume using, I mean, the prices of the previous years. And then we have to calculate the growth factor for every pair of consecutive years as GDP growth factor of the previous year divided by the nominal GDP of the previous year, right? Starting with the nominal GDP in base year, a chain is constructed. So let's see how to do. Nominal GDP, we're already done with it. So it's 1 times 100 plus 250, etc., etc. for all the other years, right? So which is the price and quantity for each good, okay, and service. And now for the GDP of the using the prices the previous year, it is easy. In 2014 we don't have the data of 2013, therefore this is not available. We start from 2015, therefore. So in 2015, as you see here, 350, not 600. Why? Because we are using the prices of the previous year. So we have the quantity of this year of 2015 and the prices of the previous year. So 150 times 1, which is 150, plus 100 times 2, which is 200. 200 plus 150 is 350, right? And for the rest, we do the same. So 150 times 3 plus 200 times 2, etc., etc. We get those results. So once we have this part, which is the GDP using the prices of the previous year, okay? So we have the real GDP now in volume, okay? We calculate the growth factor for the every pair of consecutive years. That's why it makes sense that we put in between these 2 years, right? So we have 350 divided by 200. For these 2 years is 850 divided by 600, etc., etc. We calculate the growth factor. Once we have this, we calculate the real GDP. We do the multiplication. We multiply real GDP times this growth factor. Okay. So if we come back, as we have the real GDP here of 2015 is 600, of 2016 is 850, etc. So this is what you see here: 600, 850. Then here it would be 780 times the growth factor of those between the 2 consecutive years. Right? We get then it's like correcting the real GDP. Okay, using the chain. But before the base year, in the base year all the time constant and current prices, GDP at constant and at current, they are equal. But for the previous years before the base year, we divide the base year by the growth factor. That's it for the GDP at chain value. Thank you for watching. We will carry on this discussion with the approaches of calculation of GDP. Thank you.